December 7, 1942, 8:47 p.m. The port city of Bordeaux, France. A German naval officer named Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartenstein stands on the dock, smoking a cigarette, watching cargo ships being loaded with supplies for U-boats. He's 34 years old, from Hamburg, married with 2 daughters back home. The war's been good to him so far. Safe posting. No combat. Just paperwork and dock inspections. What he doesn't know is that 60 miles out in the Bay of Biscay, 10 British Marines are climbing into 5 kayaks, about to paddle straight into his harbor and blow up everything he's guarding. This is the story of Operation Frankton, the most audacious commando raid of World War II. A mission so insane that when it was first proposed, the British High Command literally laughed it out of the room. Kayaks? Against the entire German Navy? Impossible. But here's the thing about impossible missions: sometimes they work. And when they do, they change the war. Let me take you back 6 months earlier. June 1942. A British officer named Herbert Blondie Hassler is sitting in a planning room in Portsmouth, staring at aerial photographs of Bordeaux Harbor. Hassler's 38 years old, Royal Marines, with a reputation for being quietly brilliant and completely fearless. The kind of guy who solves problems by doing things nobody else would even attempt. The problem is this: Bordeaux is where Germany repairs and resupplies its U-boats. Cargo ships bring in supplies, spare parts, torpedoes. Those U-boats are sinking Allied convoys at a catastrophic rate. 700,000 tons of shipping lost per month. Britain's starving. The convoys are Britain's lifeline, and they're being strangled. The RAF tried bombing Bordeaux. Didn't work. The harbor's too well defended, the target's too small. Bombing from 20,000 feet just kills French civilians and misses the ships. What they need is precision. Someone who can get right up to those cargo ships and place explosives exactly where it hurts. Hassler's looking at those photos and thinking, kayaks. His commanding officer, a colonel named Robert Neville, thinks Hassler's lost his mind. You want to paddle canoes into one of the most heavily defended ports in France? Through 60 miles of enemy-controlled water? In December? Hassler's response is beautifully simple: yes, sir. Because they'll never expect it. And that's the genius of the plan. It's so stupid, so obviously suicidal, that the Germans would never see it coming. Who the hell attacks a naval base with kayaks? The mission gets approved. Barely. Churchill himself signs off on it, mostly because conventional options aren't working. They call it Operation Frankton. The men who volunteer get a nickname that'll stick forever: the Cockleshell Heroes. Hassler handpicks his team. He needs men who are expert swimmers, can navigate by stars, won't panic under pressure, and are willing to accept that survival is optional. 34 men volunteer. He takes 12. Then cuts it to 10 when 2 guys fail the final training exercise. Let me introduce you to them, because you need to know who these men were before we watch most of them die. Marine Bill Sparks, 20 years old, from London's East End. Joined the Marines at 17 to escape poverty. Smallest guy in the unit at 5 feet 6 inches, which actually helps in a kayak. His mother thinks he's doing administrative work in Scotland. He hasn't told her he's training for a suicide mission. Marine Jock Ewart, 22. Scottish. Built like a brick wall. Can paddle for 12 hours straight without slowing down. Engaged to a girl named Mary back in Glasgow. Carries her photo in a waterproof pouch around his neck. Corporal Albert Laver, 23. From Birmingham. Former boxer. Hands like shovels. Volunteers because his brother died at Dunkirk and he wants payback. Any payback. Against any Germans. Marine David Moffat, 21. From Yorkshire. Farm kid. Can navigate by stars better than anyone in the unit. Keeps a diary that'll break your heart when you read it later. Sergeant Sam Wallace, 26. Career Marine. Hassler's second in command. The steadying presence. The guy who keeps everyone calm when things go sideways. Has a wife and infant son in Plymouth. And then there's Marine Bill Mills, 19 years old. Baby of the group. Shouldn't even be here. Failed the swimming test twice. Hassler kept him anyway because the kid had something intangible: he never quit. Ever. 5 two-man kayaks. 10 men. Code names: Catfish, Crayfish, Conger, Coalfish, and Cuttlefish. Hassler and Sparks in Catfish. The plan is elegant in its simplicity. Submarine drops them off 60 miles from Bordeaux. They paddle up the Gironde River at night, hide during the day, reach the harbor in 3 nights, plant limpet mines on cargo ships, escape overland to Spain. Simple. Except for the tides that can capsize a kayak, the German patrol boats, the searchlights, the fact that it's December and the water temperature is 45 degrees, And oh yeah, if you're caught in a kayak with explosives, the Germans will execute you as a saboteur, not treat you as a prisoner of war. December 7, 1942, 7:30 p.m. HMS Tuna, a British submarine, surfaces in the Bay of Biscay. The sea is rough. 6-foot swells. Rain. Zero visibility. Perfect conditions if you're trying to stay hidden. Terrible conditions if you're about to paddle 60 miles. The kayaks are passed up through the submarine hatch. The men follow. They're wearing waterproof suits, life jackets, and carrying enough explosives to sink a battleship. Each kayak has 8 limpet mines attached to the sides. Magnetic mines. Stick them to a ship's hull below the waterline, set the timer, paddle away. Ship sinks 4 hours later when everyone's asleep. Hassler does a final check. Looks each man in the eye. Doesn't give a speech. Just says, "See you in Spain, lads." At 8 p.m. they push off into the darkness. 5 kayaks. 10 men. The submarine dives and disappears. They're on their own now. For the first 2 hours, everything's fine. Cold, exhausting, but fine. They're paddling in formation, staying close. The plan is to stay together until they hit the Gironda estuary, then split up to make harder targets. Then the sea decides to kill them. A wave. Not even a particularly big one. Just badly timed. Hits Coalfish broadside. The kayak flips. Marine Jock Ewart and Marine Eric Fisher go into the water. 45-degree water. They're wearing life jackets, but they're weighted down with gear. They manage to right the kayak. Climb back in. But the kayak's swamped. Taking on water. It's sluggish, unstable. Hassler paddles over. Realizes immediately, Coalfish is done. The kayak can't make it 60 miles. But they can't take the men aboard the other kayaks. Too much weight. Not enough room. Hassler has to make a choice. Leave them. Or abort the whole mission to save 2 men. He leaves them. Tells Ewart and Fisher to paddle back toward the French coast about 8 miles. Try to make landfall. Evade. Escape. Good luck. Then he paddles away. Leaves 2 of his men alone in the darkness in a sinking kayak miles from shore. Ewart and Fisher never made it. Their bodies washed up on the French coast 3 days later. The photograph Ewart kept of his fiancée Mary was still in the waterproof pouch around his neck. Now there are 4 kayaks. 8 men. They paddle through the night. Arms burning. Back screaming. The cold so intense it feels like knives. They're not just fighting the sea. They're fighting their own bodies, begging them to stop. At 6:15 a.m. they spot the French coast. Rocky shoreline. They need to find somewhere to hide before daylight fully arrives. But the tide's going out, exposing sandbanks and mudflats. Conger, paddled by Corporal George Sherd and Marine David Moffat, hits a sandbank. They try to push off. Can't. They're stuck. And the sun's coming up. Hassler makes the same terrible decision again. Can't wait. Can't help. Keep moving. Conger was captured that afternoon by German coastal patrol. Sherd and Moffat were interrogated for 2 days, then executed by firing squad under Hitler's commando order. Moffat's diary was confiscated. Years later it was found in German archives. The last entry written the night before they launched. "I hope Mum gets my letters. I hope she knows I died doing something that mattered." 3 kayaks left. 6 men. They hide during the day in marshland along the riverbank. Freezing. Wet. Eating cold rations. Can't light a fire. Can't make noise. German patrols everywhere. They can hear voices. Trucks. Once, a patrol passes within 50 feet. They lie in the mud, barely breathing, while German soldiers smoke cigarettes and joke about French girls. That night, they paddle again. Up the Gironda River. The current's against them now. Every mile is agony. Marine Bill Mills in Cuttlefish is starting to fade. Hypothermia setting in. His partner, Marine Bill Ellery, is trying to keep him awake, keep him paddling. But Mills is 19 years old and his body's shutting down. At 2 a.m. December 9th, Cuttlefish capsizes. Just flips over. No warning. Mills and Ellery go into the water. They try to right it. Can't. The kayak's damaged. Leaking. Hassler paddles over again. 3rd time. 3 kayaks down. Same impossible decision. He tells Mills and Ellery to make for shore. Hide. Escape. Sends them off into the darkness. Mills died of hypothermia that night. They found his body 3 days later, still wearing his life jacket. Ellery was captured, interrogated, executed. He was 23 years old. 2 kayaks left. For men. Hassler and Sparks in Catfish. Sergeant Wallace and Marine Robert Ewart in Crayfish. And here's where the story gets insane. Because most commanders would abort. 6 men dead or captured. Mission compromised. Turn back. Hassler keeps going. December 11, 1942. 11:30 p.m. They reach Bordeaux Harbor. And it's lit up like Christmas. Searchlights sweeping the water. Patrol boats moving. Sentries on the docks. And right there, exactly where intelligence said they'd be, cargo ships. 5 of them. Massive vessels loaded with supplies for U-boats. Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartenstein is doing his final inspection of the night. Walking the docks. Everything's secure. Everything's normal. He's thinking about going home. Writing a letter to his daughters. Meanwhile, 4 British Marines are paddling through his harbor in the dark spaces between searchlight sweeps. Let me describe what that takes. You're in a kayak. Exposed. 1 searchlight hits you, you're dead. 1 patrol boat spots you, you're dead. 1 sentry on a dock looks down at the wrong moment, you're dead. And you have to paddle silently up to a massive cargo ship, attach magnetic mines to its hull while water's sloshing and the ship's creaking, and there are guards on deck 50 feet above you. Hassler and Sparks take the first ship. They paddle right up to the hull. Sparks pulls out a limpet mine, reaches over, places it against the metal below the waterline. It clamps on magnetically with a soft thunk that sounds like a gunshot in the silence. Sets the timer. 8 hours. They place 4 more mines along the hull. 5 mines. Each one packed with enough explosives to blow a 15-foot hole. They do this 3 more times. 3 more ships. 20 limpet mines total. Wallace and Ewart hit 2 ships on the other side of the harbor. Same process. Silent. Methodical. Terrifying. At 3:15 a.m. they're done. They paddle out of the harbor the same way they came in. Through the searchlights. Past the patrol boats. Hartenstein walks past the very ship they just mined, 10 minutes after they planted the explosives. By dawn, Hassler, Sparks, Wallace, and Ewart are 15 miles upriver. Hidden in marsh grass. Waiting. At noon, December 12, 1942, the mines detonate. 5 cargo ships. Simultaneous explosions. The harbor erupts in chaos. 2 ships sink completely. 3 more are damaged so badly they're out of commission for months. 20,000 tons of shipping destroyed. Millions of dollars in supplies lost. The entire harbor shut down for weeks while they sweep for more mines. Captain Lieutenant Hartenstein stands on the dock, watching ships burn, and realizes someone penetrated his security, got past everything, destroyed 5 ships, and he never saw them coming. He writes in his report, "The audacity is incomprehensible. How did they reach the harbor? Where did they come from? This should have been impossible." But here's the thing, the mission's only half over. Because now Hassler, Sparks, Wallace, and Ewart have to escape. They're 80 miles inside occupied France. Every German in the region is looking for them. And they have to walk to Spain. They split up. Better odds. Wallace and Ewart go north. Hassler and Sparks go south. Wallace and Ewart made it 6 miles. German patrol captured them at a checkpoint on December 15th. They were interrogated, then executed by firing squad on December 19th. Sergeant Sam Wallace was 26 years old. He never met his son, who was 3 months old when he died. That leaves Hassler and Sparks. For 18 days they walked through occupied France, sleeping in barns, stealing food, avoiding patrols. They had help from the French resistance, who moved them between safe houses, but it was still 100 miles on foot through enemy territory in winter. On January 1, 1943, they crossed the Pyrenees into Spain, collapsed in a Spanish village, were arrested by Spanish police, who were technically neutral but secretly sympathetic. The Spanish held them for 2 weeks, then quietly released them to British intelligence. Hassler and Sparks were the only survivors. 2 out of 10. When they reached London in February 1943, they were debriefed by naval intelligence. The officer conducting the debriefing, a commander named Ralph Izard, asked Hassler, "Was it worth it? 6 men dead for 5 ships." Hassler's response is in the official report. Ask the convoy sailors. Ask the men who would have died if those ships had delivered their cargo. Yes, it was worth it. And he was right. Because Operation Frankton had an impact far beyond those 5 ships. Winston Churchill said the raid shortened the war by 6 months. That's hard to quantify, but here's what we know. The destruction of those cargo ships created a massive bottleneck in U-boat resupply. For 3 months, U-boats couldn't get parts and ammunition as quickly. That meant fewer U-boats at sea. That meant more Allied convoys getting through. In the first quarter of 1943, convoy losses dropped by 38%. You can draw a direct line from Operation Frankton to that statistic. But the psychological impact was even bigger. The Germans were terrified. If the British could penetrate Bordeaux harbor with kayaks, what else could they do? The Germans diverted thousands of troops to coastal defense, built more bunkers, increased patrols, resources that could have been used elsewhere. All because 4 men in kayaks did the impossible. Now let's talk about what happened to the men who didn't make it back. Jacques Euart's fiancée Mary received a telegram in January 1943, missing, presumed dead. She waited 2 years before she accepted he wasn't coming home. Never married. Died in 1998. They buried her with the last letter Euart sent before the mission. David Moffat's mother received his personal effects in 1945, including the diary. She read it once, never opened it again. Donated it to the Imperial War Museum in 1962 with a note, so people remember what he gave. Bill Mills' mother never recovered. Her son was 19. She'd sent him off thinking he was safe. Learning he died of hypothermia in a kayak broke something in her. She died in 1947, 52 years old. Friends said she died of heartbreak. The 6 men who were captured and executed? Their deaths were war crimes. Hitler's commando orders stated that commandos caught behind enemy lines were to be shot, not taken prisoner. After the war, several German officers were tried and convicted for executing the cockleshell heroes. Small justice, but justice nonetheless. And what about Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartenstein, the German officer who was in charge of harbor security that night? He was transferred in disgrace after the raid, sent to active U-boat duty as punishment. On March 15, 1943, his U-boat was sunk by Allied depth charges in the Atlantic. He survived. Was picked up by another U-boat. That U-boat was sunk 2 weeks later. He survived again. In 1947, during war crimes trials, Hartenstein was called as a witness. He testified about the raid. And the prosecutor asked him, "Do you respect the men who attacked your harbor?" Hartenstein's answer is preserved in trial transcripts. "Respect? I am in awe. They accomplished what I thought impossible. They were the bravest enemies I ever faced." He met Bill Sparks in 1953. A chance encounter at a naval history conference in London. 2 old warriors who'd been on opposite sides of an impossible night. They shook hands. Talked for 3 hours. Hartenstein asked Sparks how they did it. Sparks told him, "We were more scared of failing than dying." That's how. Hartenstein died in 1963, age 54. His daughter said he talked about the raid until the end. Called it the night he learned that courage wasn't about nationality. It was about what men would risk for something bigger than themselves. Herbert "Blondie" Hassler lived until 1987. 73 years old. Never stopped talking about the men who didn't come back. Every December 7th, he'd write letters to their families. Same thing every year, I think about them. I honor them. What they did mattered. Bill Sparks lived until 2002. 80 years old. Gave hundreds of interviews. Spoke at schools. Always said the same thing, "I'm not a hero. The heroes are at the bottom of the Gironde River. I just got lucky." But here's what makes this story matter today. It's not just about military history. It's about what humans can do when the odds say they can't. 10 men in kayaks attacked one of the most heavily defended harbors in Europe. 6 died trying. 4 succeeded. And they changed the course of the war. Think about that. Kayaks. Against the German Navy. It should have been a joke. Instead, it became legend. There's a memorial in Bordeaux now, right on the dock where the ships exploded. A simple plaque with 10 names and 1 sentence, "They came in cockleshells and shook the world." Every year, British and French Marines hold a ceremony there. They paddle out in kayaks just like Hassler's team did 80 years ago, and place wreaths in the water where coalfish, conger, and cuttlefish went down. And German naval officers attend. Because history has a way of turning enemies into people who share the same respect for courage. The last time this ceremony happened, in 2022, a German admiral gave a speech. He said, "We lost that battle. But we learned something that night. Bravery knows no flag." Those 10 men showed us what the human spirit can accomplish. We honor them not as enemies, but as warriors who remind us what we're all capable of. 10 men launched in kayaks on a December night in 1942. Only 2 came home. But what they did echoed across the entire war. Shortened it. Saved lives. Proved that impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. And somewhere in the cold waters off Bordeaux, beneath the shipping lanes and the modern harbor, lie 3 kayaks that changed history. Coalfish, conger, cuttlefish, and the men who paddled them into legend.